I just really want people to believe that it is possible. You can still buy land. Even if I was never a millionaire, I don't have a sugar daddy, I don't have an inheritance, none of that. I didn't get child support, like none of that. I am not the person who should be owning 2 properties right now. I am not the person who should have bought 5 acres cash. Like, that is not me. Stereotypically, like, I'm not the person that they would say could be doing this, but I did it. And so I know that other people can do it too.
If I had $1 for every time that my life took a sour turn, I'd be rich and rolling violet and hollering at your girl. I'd be making little money and spending it like I'm rich. I'd be making bad decisions and thinking that
I've debated whether I was gonna make this video or not, but I've been hearing a lot of discussion about buying land, owning land, finding land. So I just wanted to weigh in and share, I guess, my perspective and kind of how I did it and what I did. And some things to consider if you're also thinking about buying land. So I would start with my number one gripe, I think. Is gripe the right word? I'm not sure. But the idea that the only way to buy land is if you take out a loan or acquire debt of some sort. That is not true. You can and should consider buying land cash. The first thing to even make the idea of buying land cash seem even doable is the recognition that land in all places is not the same price. So while there are a lot of places that are completely out of reach, way too expensive, hella overpriced, there are some places that still are not. And so perhaps you might need to consider relocating. Because where you live is actually a choice. And where you work is a choice. All of these things are choices. So when people say, I live in New York, I can't buy land here, that's probably true and you are probably right. And so that might mean that you may need to consider relocating. And maybe it doesn't even mean you have to leave your state, but maybe you have to leave the city, or maybe you're an hour or 2 outside of the city. And the more open you are to exploring options outside of what you're used to and what your comfort is, the more options that you'll have for purchasing land. So I would encourage people to be open. If you're rigid in where you have to live, like how close you have to be to certain things, you are going to be really limited and therefore you don't have as many options. But that's a choice. And so I think it's really important for us to first accept and acknowledge how much power we actually do have. We don't have to just be victims of our life choices. You know, these things don't just happen to us. You don't just end up living somewhere. You don't just end up with a $500,000 mortgage. Like, these things don't just happen. We actually make choices. And so I think it's a great time to consider making some different or better choices in order to create a different kind of life for yourself. The other thing that makes the idea of purchasing land cash possible is, again, making better choices and adjusting your lifestyle. Maybe that means you trade in your leased car and buy a beater car cash, which is not going to be as fancy, it's not going to be as new, but it'll get you from A to B and allow you to be able to put aside some cash. Maybe that means eating out once a week instead of 7 times a week. I don't know. These are all personal choices that we all have to make for ourselves, where you're willing or not willing to compromise. And that looks different for everyone. So by no means am I telling anyone what they should do. I'm just here to share what I did and what I suggest other people do if they want to also do what I did and see that it is actually doable. It's not an impossible thing. I think this idea that you can't own land, you can't buy land cash, it's too late, you know, our time has passed, it's no longer possible. It's not true. That's what they want you to believe. That is not true. You can still own land, you can still buy land, and you can buy land cash if that's what you want to do. What I did was I live well below my means, like below my means. And every penny went to saving. because I view my land purchase as my retirement. Like, this is my retirement plan. What I'm building for myself over these next few years is my retirement plan. And so for me, it didn't make sense to have a bunch of money sitting in the bank earning, 0.01% interest. For me, it made more sense for me to use that money to invest in myself and invest in my future. So that's what I did with purchasing the 5 acres that I just got. And then my intention is to develop that land into something that can sustain me into retirement and for my future. I don't care about shoes, bags, cars, none of it. Actually, there's really nothing at this point, because I started this journey of kind of like downsizing life and just reprioritizing things and really divesting from the systems. I started this like 10 years ago. So where I'm at right now, there really isn't anything that I care to spend money on besides my land and my land development, like my farm. I mean, I'm a seed hoarder, so I'm buying seeds and trees that I probably don't need, because who needs 3 varieties of mulberries, things like that. But I don't view that as a problem, because that's my priority. And so that's why I say it's a personal choice, and it just depends on what you value. It might seem wasteful to some people, like, why do you have 6 peach trees? Because I want 6 peach trees. But some people might think that's excessive. You don't actually need 6 peach trees. Maybe you should sell 3 of them and keep 3. Maybe they're right, but for me, I feel better about having 6 peach trees. So these are, again, personal choices, to each their own. But for me, I feel more secure with my basic needs being met. And for me, my basic needs, again, not speaking for anyone else because I can't, my basic needs are food and shelter and water, not even clothing, because I prefer to be naked. That's really all I spend my money on. So I was able to save a good chunk of money because I don't care about anything else except buying my land. So any money that I got or earned extra money and anything, any pennies that I got went towards saving for my land. And I was also able to do that because of the choices I made years ago, again, with paying down my debt. I don't have a car loan. I don't have a mortgage, or I no longer have, I should say, because I paid these things off. I never had student debt, so I don't have any student loans. I worked through college and paid instead of taking out loans. So for me, not having debt is another thing that allowed me to be able to even view any of this as a possibility. If I still had my mortgage, if I was still paying on my car, things like that, I'm not sure how I would have done this, if at all. I probably wouldn't have been thinking about doing this, because I was just drowning in debt. Land ownership was a necessity for me. And so I'm grateful to be able, just beyond grateful actually, to be able to move my farm and to have somewhere to build, and to know that it's mine, that as long as I keep paying property taxes on it, I can keep it. And I know there's this argument that if you buy land, you don't really own it because you still have to pay property taxes. Come on now. I will gladly pay my, I think it's $120 a year property taxes on my 5 acres for the rest of my life, if that's what I have to do to keep my land. I don't consider that a settling of any sort, or it's fine. Property taxes, I'm not going to be able to get away from those regardless of what I own. And so I own this house, which I pay $1,200 a year property taxes here, and I have not even a 1/4 acre of land to grow on. So I'd much rather pay the $120 a year for 5 acres than be in the city paying $1,200 and I don't have nowhere to grow. So this is just not it for me. Again, to each their own. But for me, if I have to pay property taxes, which I do because I believe that you either own or be owned, I've done both and I prefer to own. Yeah, I have to own land. That's in 2025. That for me is the best choice. Okay, let me think through I'm just winging this. I have no notes or anything. You want to start with the process of understanding why you want to do this, why you want to buy land, and what you want to use the land for. This is important because as you start looking for land, the other thing that I highly advise, before I even use any kind of gas money to drive over and walk a piece of property or any of that, I was calling the city or county's zoning department to make sure all the things that I wanted to do on my land were allowed on this land. Don't assume just because it's rural land or ag land or in a small town that you can do whatever you want to do. There are so many land use regulations. You do not want to assume. You do not want to take the listing agent's suggestions or advice as the Bible. It is not. You need to call the zoning department. Just tell them what you intend to do and listen as they tell you what things that you just told them are you actually allowed to do versus those things that you're not allowed to do. Take notes and potentially remove these locations off of your list based on whatever feedback the zoning person gives you. But you cannot, I'm not saying that the agents or the owner or anyone else involved in the real estate transaction will be intentionally deceitful or anything like that. I'm saying a lot of times they don't know, but they think they do, or they're making assumptions as well. But you're going to be the one who's going to have to live with these regulations and zoning restrictions, and so you need to find out for yourself. It's a quick search on the Google. All you have to do is put in whatever the city is or county, depending on where the property is located. Type in the county and then add zoning regulation department or something, and it'll give you a number. You might have to call a couple places. For example, if I was calling a county and I haven't been able to figure out like who's in charge of zoning, like who's the person I need to talk to, I would call and say, hi, I'm considering purchasing land in X county, and I was hoping to speak with someone responsible for zoning and building regulations. And they would say, oh, let me connect you with Bob. Here's his cell phone number or whatever, because I was dealing with small towns. And then I would call Bob and I would say, hi, Bob. My name's Letitia. I'm looking at buying a piece of land that's in X county. And I just wanted to make sure everything that I'd like to do on the land is within zoning restrictions or something like that. And he'd say, oh, okay. I'm happy to help you with that. Do you have the address or the parcel number? And I would give him the address or the parcel number. You would be able to get the address from the listing, very likely. The parcel number should also be in the listing, but if it isn't, you can contact the listing agent or your agent if you have one and ask them for the parcel number. You could also just look it up, public record. If you have the address, you can look it up in the county's tax records to get the parcel number as well. There's a lot of research that goes into this, or for me there was, because it was important to me to buy in a place that didn't have a lot of regulations and restrictions, because I got big plans and I don't want nobody pissing on my parade. I want to be able to do what I want to do on the land, and if I'm not able to do those things, one, I want to know that so that I can make an informed decision as to whether I want to continue with the process of purchasing this land or I just want to move on. But I want to know. And so Bob would say, I would say, hey, so I'm hoping to just operate a little hobby farm. I'd like to have bees, maybe chickens, a large garden, maybe a tiny house. Okay. And so then Bob would say, okay, so let me tell you, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just writing down as Bob is saying, you can only have 50 chickens within a 1/4 acre. Beehives have to be facing in this direction, have to be placed this many feet from the road. Like, there's a lot. Or Bob might say, okay, well, we don't have any restrictions on beekeeping in the county, so you'll be fine with that. In terms of your tiny house, what type of structure were you thinking? And I would say, I don't actually know yet. Maybe a converted shed, a shipping container, maybe a mobile home. Okay, well, in our county, we don't allow shipping container builds unless it's front faced with wood. If you want to have a mobile home, you can have a mobile home, but it can't be a single wide in this county, on this road. You can only have a double wide or bigger. You know, these are the things that I wanted to know, because again, I'm trying to make an informed decision, and I have a pretty clear idea going into this what I'm looking to do, and therefore I need them to know what I intend to do, and you let me know if it's going to be a problem from the beginning. Like, I just don't need any extra stress, honestly. Like, yes, you can fight zoning regulations, you can appeal and try to get an exception, waivers and things like that, but I personally didn't want to go into this land journey knowing that I was going to have to fight. I don't want to have to fight. I feel like everything else is a fight. I want to live in peace. And so I was calling every zoning department of every piece of land that I was considering looking at it. When I was vetting my properties, I was also looking at how much property taxes were. So if there was a property, for example, actually there was a property that I was considering that was half of an acre, and the property taxes were $1,200 because it was considered lakefront residential, which I didn't care about that. But anyway, it was half an acre for $1,200 a year for property taxes. That's what I pay on this house near Atlanta, like way bigger. Like, it's just, that didn't make no sense. And then my 5 acres that I was considering as well, property taxes are $120 a year. So just knowing how life works, the price of these things is going to continue to go up for the rest of my life. And as I'm considering this a part of my retirement plan, thinking for the future, I know the prices of these things are going to continue to go up. Chances of them going down are like slim to none. So do I want to start with a property that has too high property taxes for what it is? Or do I want to start with something that has lower property taxes and is a larger lot? Again, yes, it's further away from the city, but for me, that wasn't a negative because I wanted to be further away from a big city. So this goes back to point number 1, which is understanding what it is you want and what your purpose for buying the land is and what things that you desire for your land. I knew I didn't want to be near the city. Like, that was the whole point. Like, if I wanted to stay in the city, I could stay where I'm at. But I wanted to be away from the city. I wanted to have another location that was not centrally located. You not just coming by my house talking about you was in the neighborhood on my acreage. No. You have to be out there, and you're not coming out there unless you're coming for me. Like, there's nothing else out there. So that's what I wanted for my life. So you have to figure out, though, what's important to you and determine like what's best. But the property taxes was another thing I considered. And again, that's public information. You can go onto the county's website and you can look at how much the current owner has paid for at least the last 5 to 10 property tax years. You can see how much they paid in property taxes. You could also see how much it has been increasing annually to give you a kind of a rough idea of what you can expect for annual increases. Obviously, there's no rule. They can go 50% next year if they want to, just because they feel like it. I knew going into this, I wasn't going to have any debt on the land, and the goal is to keep my living expenses as low as possible. So property taxes is going to be a part of my living expenses. And so I want my living expenses to be as low as possible, which means I need my property taxes to be as low as possible. For me, property taxes was another thing that I considered when I was determining whether a property was attractive to me or not. And if those properties passed my zoning criteria in that they allowed me to do all the things I wanted to do, then I would be open to going to look at these properties. And so with going to look at them, I would just contact the listing agent. Oh, I guess I should say, I purchased my land without a real estate agent, without a buyer's agent, anyone representing me. I'm actually a licensed realtor in the state of Georgia. I'm inactive, but I am licensed to sell real estate in the state of Georgia. So I just didn't feel like I needed a realtor. But definitely if you feel you would be better supported with an agent, I definitely think you should do that. But if you're looking for land, I think it is important. You can't every agent isn't familiar with searching for raw land. For example, your top millionaire real estate agent or whatever. That's not the same person that you hire if you're looking for 2 acres in Bumblefuck, Georgia of raw land. Like, that's not going to be your agent. It's important to find a listing agent that's familiar with land or buying land and land purchasing, because there's a lot more that goes into it than just buying an already built home. They're 2 different processes. So I encourage you, if you are gonna look for a listing agent, or excuse me, a buyer's agent to represent you in your transaction, it's important to get someone who's familiar with land transactions, not just housing transactions. It is not the same thing at all. You want someone who's gonna be open to walking the land with you. He or she is too cute and pulls up to the road and tells you like, okay, so the property is over there. Y'all can go ahead and look, you know, I'll be right here when you're done. No, again, not your agent. You need an agent who's gonna put their boots on and be ready to walk that land with you as well, who's gonna be familiar with like looking for land markers, wells, having surveyors come out, like easements, and you need someone who's like versed with land, not just the real estate buying process. I don't want to sound discouraging about hiring agents. This is so hard for me because honestly, I got my real estate license because I felt like realtors sucked. And from my first home buying process, which when I bought this house, I went through like 4 realtors. It's really hard to find a good realtor. I mean, it's really easy to get a real estate license. Enough said. I got my license so that I could do my own transactions in the future. That's the reason I got my real estate license. So it's hard for me to be really encouraging of folks with hiring agents. But I understand the role of an agent, a good agent. If you can find a good agent, it is a blessing. You should hire them. They are worth every penny. That's what I'll say. But all agents are not created equal. That's it. So anyway, I did not have an agent. I was representing myself. For the most part, I was just looking on Zillow. I would just put my search criteria in. I had saved searches, so whenever something popped up that met my criteria, Zillow would just directly email it to me, and so then I could just start my whole little process with that. But I would go to the listing on Zillow. I would find the listing agent, and I would just call the listing agent. I would just say, "Hi, Johnny. I was calling about the property at 1029 East Oak Street in Macon, Georgia. I was interested in going to look at it next Wednesday. Is that okay? Is it open access? Can I just go take a look at it?" And Johnny would say, "Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, you guys go ahead and go out and look out there, walk around. Let me know what you think." "Okay, great. Thanks so much. Are there any like land markers or survey lot lines to help me identify like the perimeter of the actual property listing? Or do you have a survey that I can reference?" This is Johnny now. "I don't have a survey. It hasn't been surveyed." Note to self, hasn't been surveyed. But there should be some markers out there, and the owner went and put a cross on the true story. The owner told me she went out there and put a cross on the big tree that you can see from the main road, so that should tell you where the property starts. And then my real estate sign is on the other end of the property, so that should tell you where you can go in. "Oh, okay, Johnny, thank you so much. I think I should be able to figure it out from there." Click. Right. So they may or may not be helpful, first and foremost, right? But even with that description that they gave me, I'm able to go onto the county's website, which I rely a lot on the county information. Again, this is public knowledge, y'all. You don't have to, most counties, you don't have to pay for access for this information. You don't have to pay anybody to do it. You just go on the tax assessor's website, and there's so much information. It's actually kind of scary how much information is public. Owner's name, owner's address, lot size, how much they bought it for, all the sales transactions of this property, like who bought it before them, how much they paid, what year that was, what improvements they've made to the land, whether there's a shed, whether there's a pond on the property, all of those things. And there may also be a survey on file if you get lucky, there's a survey on file, or at least a like rough estimate of the land lot lines. And then I would use that information to go out to the property and just kind of get a rough estimate of kind of what the land looked like for the most part. I just needed like a general idea when I was walking the property. And so what I was looking for when I went out there is, first thing, I always surveyed the surrounding area, like what the neighborhood looks like. I'm looking for cars set up on bricks, stray dogs, like things that I just personally am not a fan of, that would kind of affect my experience with living on the property. I'm looking at how close the neighbors are. I'm looking at where the neighbors' houses are in proximity to the land that I'm looking at. I'm looking at how much vacant land is around me, therefore how much I could potentially expand in the future by acquiring these vacant lots around the lot that I'm potentially considering buying. I'm looking at the condition of the road. I'm looking at where the utility lines are, like what side of the road they're on, how far they go down, because this will tell me whether I could likely get access to utilities on my property. It'll also tell me if I have any overhead restrictions, like if the utility lines are on the side of the road where the property that I'm looking at buying are, that means there's utility lines right there. So if I wanted to get a big truck through or something like that, these are things I would have to consider, that the utility lines are going across my property. Or do they have underground utility lines? Like, these are things I'm looking at, like what type of improvements have been made in the area around me. And then once I actually go to the property, I'm looking at access to the property. Is there a driveway? What's the condition of the driveway? What's the slope of the property? What's the slope of the driveway? What's the slope of the land? Are there any, is the lot level, or are there any dips or places that look like water collects? When you're out walking the properties, the other thing that I'm looking at are the natural vegetations that's growing already on the property. For example, if I see a lot of ferns or fern-like plants, I know that that means this area is shaded and wet, because this is the type of environment that ferns naturally grow in. And so that's probably going to tell me, okay, this area probably collects a lot of water. If I see dandelions growing, that tells me that the soil is calcium deficient. Like, these are the things I'm looking at as I'm walking through, like what type of stuff is naturally growing there, because that tells me, again, the condition of the environment that the land is, as well as the condition of the soil. So I would suggest downloading a plant identifier app before you go out if you're not as familiar or comfortable with identifying plants. It's helpful to be looking at the plant varieties that are naturally out there. I'm also looking at what trees are growing on the property, again, because this tells me what the environment is like out there on the land already naturally, which will help me to know what type of development I'm gonna have to do, like whether I'm gonna have to take out certain trees or how I could use them and things like that. I always take a shovel with me as like my walking stick and my, if I gotta hit something or fight something. I have a big shovel with me, but also it's to dig up a little soil sample. I usually just take a couple, I just pop a little bit of the soil just to kind of see what the texture looks like. If it's hard pan, if it's clay, if it's got a little loam to it, if it's sandy. Again, just to get an understanding of what the native soil looks like what would my starting point for building my farm out here look like if I just bought this land as it is. But these are things that aren't going to be on the listing. You won't actually see them or know them until you go out there and see for yourself. I think that's it for that. Maybe that was a lot, but that's actually what I do when I go out there. So let's say I went to the property, I like it, and I want to put in an offer and move forward. I start with the Zillow estimate number, what Zillow says based on their algorithms and whatever they do, their numbers, what they think the property is worth. I use that and I make a mental note of that. I also look at the county tax assessor's value to see what the tax assessment rate is, which I know is not the same as market rate, but again, it gives me a basis point for determining what the property could be worth. And most counties have the market assessed value as well as the tax assessed value, which are two different valuations, and I look at both if I have both available. Those numbers shouldn't be the same, but in some places they are close. The tax assessed and the market assessed value may be close in number, but a lot of times they're not. In either case, now I have 3 numbers, 2 to 3 numbers in my mind that gives me a rough estimate of what they think the property is worth. And then I consider what I think the property is worth based on the size, based on any improvements that they've made to the property, based on the location, based on, you know, all these things that are or are not of value to me. And I either add value or take away value based on those things. And then I come up with my own number of what I think it's worth. Of course, I'm also considering other properties in the area, other properties that I've looked at, because the other thing to consider is when you're purchasing raw land, it's, again, not like buying a house. What you want to look at when you're buying land or consider is the price per acre. Let's say there's one property that's 5 acres and they're asking $20,000, and then there's another property that's 2 acres and they want $15,000. And I'm like, oh, well, this one's less money, but it's also a lot less acreage. And so if I look at the price per acre, actually the less expensive property is actually more expensive, because again, I'm looking at the price per acre, not just the total sales price, because I'm purchasing raw land for the acreage. This is undeveloped land for the most part. I'm looking at undeveloped land. There haven't been any improvements in most cases, no improvements to the land. It's just raw land. So I'm looking at the price per acre was most important to me in evaluating like whether a property was more expensive or less expensive than the other. I'm looking at the price per acre, not the sales price. Then I would come up with a number based on my value, what Zillow says it might be worth, what the county says it might be worth. And I also look at how long the property has been on the market, where the property is located, because these are things I'm considering when I'm thinking, how much am I going to offer these people? If the property's been on the market for, let's say, less than a week, I mean, those people probably aren't going to be as open to like negotiating, because, you know, they just got here and they're still thinking I could get what I'm asking, versus someone whose property has been on the market for almost a year. They're a little more open to negotiating and coming down on their price. And so for me, the property that's been on the market for a year is more attractive than the one that's been on the market for less than a week. So because I know I have more leverage and more negotiating room with the property that's been on the market for a year. I come up with a number. I, just as a general rule, never offer what they're asking, because in most cases, especially in this highly delusional market, people are asking for way more than the property is actually worth. So I don't offer what people are asking. Again, just as a general rule, I do believe in offering fair prices. So I will offer something that is fair, but typically a few $1,000s less than what they're asking, at least, depending on what they're asking. But if I believe that the seller has their property listed at a fair price, I'm not trying to like get over on anybody. I want to create a transaction where neither of us, the seller or the buyer, feel like we got taken advantage of. We should both leave feeling like, okay, I got a good price, and then the seller should be like, okay, you know, I didn't get what I asked for, but I got more than I thought I was gonna get, or I got more than I had been getting offered. So we should both leave feeling good. Once I decide on my number of what I'm willing to offer the seller, I would then email. I prefer email because I like to keep things in writing, because I like receipts. So if I don't, for some reason, have the listing agent's email address, I will call the listing agent back. Hey Johnny, I went and looked at the property today. I think it looks great. I'd love to make an offer. Could you give me your email address, please? Sure, it's whatever, johnnybob@gmail.com. Thanks so much. You can expect that offer within the next 24 hours. Great. All right, great, thanks. Click. And then I would email my offer to Johnny, and in it, I put whatever contingencies are important to me. Again, to each their own. Talk to your agent. Do what you think is best for you. For me, I would do like an opening, you know, I walked the property, it looks great. I think it's really gonna meet my needs. I'm excited about the potential of making a deal for this property. Here is my offer for parcel number, whatever, and then it'd be bulleted. The first one says sales price and what the sales price offer I'd be willing to pay them. Financing contingency, 100% cash. Proposed closing date. I usually offer to closing within 2 weeks because again, with cash, it don't take all that extra stuff. And so I would usually do a 2-week close. Again, this is dependent because in some instances, I would need more time because I would need to get a survey. I would need to get a couple of other things, so I would need more time. But in my case, in the property that I purchased, the 5 acres, if you missed the video, I'll put it somewhere. But in the 5 acres that I purchased mine from a land developer. He had already had the property surveyed. The property had already had soil test. So I did not need to do these 2 things. Those things were provided for me. So I didn't need extra time to get a land survey out there, to get soil tests back. All that stuff was already done for me. So I put in an offer for 2 weeks closing. Oh, contingent on clear title was the other thing I added. That if for some reason the title came back cloudy or had issues, errors on the title, or the owner that said that they were the owner wasn't actually the owner or whatever, any issue with the title meant that I could get out of this deal and lose nothing if the title did not come back clear. So I put a clear title contingency on my offers as well, on all of them, regardless. The other contingency that I added is that I didn't need any seller assistance with closing costs, that I was gonna pay all of the closing costs. I wasn't asking for any assistance from the seller with closing. This just makes my offer more attractive. The fact that I'm closing fast, the fact that I'm 100% cash, so that means we don't have to wait on the bank and all the other stuff. I'm not asking for any assistance with closing costs. I think that was it. I think those are the only contingencies I put in just as like a standard. And again, every situation was different. If there was a certain issue with a certain property, then I would put in a different contingency or whatever. But if I knew all the other issues were cleared up, those were my standard contingencies that I put in. And then I would also tell them that the offer is open for acceptance until, I usually gave like 2 or 3 days. You either want to make this deal or you don't. Like, you have 2 or 3 days to consider whether you want to accept my offer or not. And yeah, I would send it to the agent and wait for them to respond. I actually put in two offers prior to my offer of my 5 acres that I bought. I put in 2 offers previously that were not accepted. It came down to price. Basically, they weren't willing to come down to a realistic number on the price, and so we weren't able to make that deal, which in hindsight, I'm so glad didn't work out on those others 2, because what I ended up with, my land that I have now, was way better than the other 2 properties that I had put in offers. So I'm glad it didn't work out. I just wait the 2 or 3 days and the agent will email me back letting me know whether the seller accepted it or whether the seller countered or rejected it or whatever the seller said. And we would go from there. And this case with the property that I just bought, the 5 acres, we went back and forth for quite a while, even though I submitted my offer to the listing agent telling him this was my highest and best, which means I'm not trying to go back and forth and negotiate with y'all. They still came back and forth and negotiated for a little bit. And actually, I just declined the back and forth in the beginning. And I just said no and walked away. And then later I came back. And I ended up closing on this property and we reached an agreement. But we were going back and forth on the price. We agreed on everything else. And then ultimately, we agreed to meet in the middle on the price. And so, the end, happy ending. It was really quick. I didn't have to do anything other than wire the money over. I had to sign a couple of documents to just seal the deal. And that was it. I closed in, it was honestly less than 2 weeks. It was like 10 days, 9-10 days. I owned the property. From the time the seller accepted my offer to closing date was 9 or 10 days. And we were done. And then I owned 5 acres. I want people to know that it's possible. I think there's just so much stuff out there that makes it seem like you just can't buy land anymore. You can't buy land, you can't buy a house, you can't own nothing. Like, you're just gonna have to rent and be happy or whatever. Like, I just don't believe that, because that hasn't been my lived experience. Whether that's paying down your debt or stacking little by little money to buy your property cash, you can do it. And yes, it does take time, for sure. It definitely takes time. It takes hard work. It takes sacrifice. It was not easy to get to this place, but once you get to the place, it's so much easier and it's so worth it. That's what I want people to get out of this, if nothing else. It's possible. Like, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. Okay. I think that's everything. I think I touched on everything. I feel so much better. I just felt like I needed to get that off my chest. It's not a fancy video. I was thinking about, like, how can I make this cute and whatever, but at the end of the day, I just needed to get it out. And I hope that it encourages anyone who is thinking about buying land or trying to decide whether they should buy land or stay where they're at, or in the middle of the process. I hope it helps someone. If nothing else, I hope you're encouraged that if you want to do something, you can totally do it. And so I hope you do. Whatever you want for yourself, you can make it happen.